This is Justin Case of American Newscape joining our friend, sports personality and author Andy Strasberg. Andy joins us today sharing an author's perspective of his latest book, My 1961. Greetings, Andy.
Thank you very much, Justin.
Hey, we're excited to have you here. I've been chasing Andy for a long time. He and I have mutual friends, and he entertains me on social media all the time because, unlike myself, Andy is a very talented writer.
No,
So,
but keep going.
yeah,
Okay.
and I was not paid for
Hey,
that comment.
you don't want to start off lying to your audience, but you know what? It's your show. Go.
Okay. He is talented. Damn it, I swear he is. Okay. Welcome. Please get us started. So, what is My 1961 all about?
Very simplistically, it's about my life in 1961, when for about 4 or 5 months I was 12 years old and then turned 13 years old. So it was everything that took place in 1961. And the book, I go into a lot of detail about my life, which was for a lot of it preoccupied with baseball. And the majority of that had to do with Roger Maris. So 70% of the book is about baseball with a focus on Roger Maris. 30% is about things that I experienced at 12 and 13 years old, everything from school and the challenges that I had at school, my relationship with my parents, girls, movies, food, radio, rock and roll, television. It was just, I was a 13-year-old in 1961.
Well, and what struck me is a lot of this book is from a 13-year-old's perspective, which I think is remarkable. And it's not. This is not a Maris tell-all book, but it's about a 13-year-old's perception of what I would deem a sports idol. And you know, Andy and I are of the almost of the same generation. The person that when I look back at those athletes of that day, they were magnanimous people. I mean, if you look at Roger Maris, if you look at Ernie Banks, we just don't see those type of people in sports anymore.
Well, you're right. And bigger than life is the term that's often used. And I was like all the other kids, uh, all my friends were baseball fans, and without exception, they were all Mickey Mantle fans. And at that age, I was not looking to share a baseball hero, baseball idol in Mickey Mantle. So I was searching for another guy that I can claim as my own. And later on in life, my parents, my sister, and my friends all said it was so obvious, Andy, that you didn't like to share with people, and so that's why I was searching for a guy I could call my own. And when Maris was traded after the 1959 season, when he was with Kansas City to the Yankees in 1960, there was a great article written in Sport Magazine, and it was titled Roger Maris Rejuvenates the Yankees. Now, I'm embarrassed to tell you, at 12 years old, I had no idea what the word rejuvenates means. So I looked it up, and I wanted to just get a better idea of what this story could possibly be about. And lo and behold, it talked about Roger Maris in terms that I had never heard before, about that he was an unselfish player, a team player, and then a family man. Now, I'm sure those terms were used for other players, but again, I was the right age. I was 13. And so they kind of stuck with me, and I followed Roger. And in 1960, Roger helped the Yankees get back into the World Series. And as a result, he was given credit by winning the Most Valuable Player Award for 1960. So going into 1961, I, I never, ever could I have imagined that 1961 was going to be the greatest summer of my youth.
How cool is that? And it's a lot different than when we were watching Mark McGwire and Sammy Sosa chase a home run title, because it was a different era. It was a different era. It was an era when pitchers like Sandy Koufax and Bob Gibson took the mound. So it was just a different time. What now? You chose him. It's very similar to myself. I was, as a young boy in the early 60s, I was sent to my grandparents' farm in Iowa, and my grandmother didn't, she was busy working, so she sat me down in front of the TV. And what was on the TV every day? The Chicago Cubs, who became my favorite baseball team when I was 3. Probably the Chicago Cubs. Did I understand or comprehend baseball? No, but I certainly enjoyed the excitement of those telecasts back in the day, and I carried them forward. And then growing up in Scottsdale, what a wonderful time to visit the Chicago Cubs in spring training when they drew upwards to 5 and maybe 600 fans to a game. How times have
Yeah,
changed.
yeah, it's interesting that you mentioned each generation has a special, unique experience that's all their own. And when Mark McGwire and Sosa were going after Rogers' single season home run record of 61, and it became apparent that they were going to eclipse 61 home runs because it was the first week of September, so there was a lot more time left. And I do remember that on September 8th, 1998, when Mark McGwire hit his 62nd home run, my phone rang and it was the local ABC affiliate, and they wanted to come out and interview me to get my reaction. They knew that I was a big Roger Maris fan, and so I gave them the okay. And I was trying to comprehend what was going on and what would be the appropriate thing to say because I was very upset. I was disappointed that Rogers' record was broken because I felt I was still a 13-year-old
Yeah.
in my heart. So when they got here and they asked me, what was my reaction, I gave them the story that in 1927, my dad was 14 years old when Babe Ruth hit his 60th home run. And when Roger hit his 61st home run, I was 13 years old. So I said, as nicely as I could, I said, and I'm happy for all the 13 and 14-year-olds who tonight saw Mark McGwire hit his 62nd home run. And they shut off the camera and they thanked me. But I'm going to tell you, Justin, I lied. I
Yeah.
was not happy.
No, I'm sure you weren't. Um, and as I recall, I mean, maybe I'm wrong because that's something I tend to do quite often. Uh, wasn't Maris under pressure from people that didn't want to see Babe Ruth's record broken?
Everybody except for that one kid, me.
Yeah,
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 it was a combination of sports writers, even the owner. Believe it or not, when I was doing this book, I have a large, large collection of newspaper clippings that I saved when I was 13. And I was able to go through them and out memories. And yeah, they did interviews with players, teammates, the Yankee owner, and they were all pulling for Mickey Mantle because he was the homegrown guy, and Roger was, the guy from Kansas City who came over. So everybody, almost everybody, was against Roger Maris hitting and 61 home runs and breaking Babe Ruth's record.
Well, when we think about Babe Ruth, and I, a lot of my life have believed he wasn't of this planet because when Babe Ruth was hitting 60 home runs, the next closest adversary was what, 18, 19 home runs? And
Well, if you don't count Lou Gehrig,
okay, okay.
yeah,
What did
yeah,
Lou do that year? Do you remember roughly?
yeah, in the 40s.
Wow, wow. And two men among men, but and the balls were different. I mean, the balls they would play the balls till there was, they couldn't use them anymore, and And I remember accounts of Hack Wilson, whether or not he hit a home run because they couldn't see the ball and they weren't sure it went into the stands because they were playing and it was too dark to be playing baseball. It was just a different generation in time. And I can't imagine the pressure that Roger Maris must have felt setting up out that. Now, did he get along with Mickey Mantle?
Oh, they were roommates.
Okay.
Bob served Mickey Mantle, and Roger had a an apartment in Queens, one of the suburbs of, well, actually, one of the boroughs of of New York City, and they would drive in together. Yes,
Close
they were
friends.
great friends.
Okay. Okay. And remind me, did he play with Billy Martin at all? Or was that
No,
that was before Billy's time
yeah,
or
yeah. I don't think that they shared being on the same team.
okay.
Roger came out in '57 with Cleveland. Billy had his run-in with the Yankees. It's an interesting question. I can't say for sure, but I don't think that their careers overlapped being on the same team. I know it didn't happen with the Yankees.
I know a well respected man, Billy Martin, had a few drinks with him at the Pink Pony. And I remember that he struck me as a very angry person.
I'm sure he had some issues,
Yeah,
but that's probably another story.
that probably is. Okay, back to 1961. When did you start to know you were going to write this book? Were you a teenager?
I was Miss Kramer, Beatrice Kramer, was our English teacher. This is one of my favorite questions because people always want to know what was the inspiration. Well, this was a school assignment in 1961. Beatrice Kramer, my English teacher, wanted each of us to write our autobiography. And so I started, schoolwork. So I started to work on putting together my autobiography, and I interviewed my mother, my sister, my dad, and started to write notes. And my sister would type it up for me. And then when it came time to hand it in, which was in March, uh, I got a very positive remark from written on the cover from Miss Kramer, and I started thinking to myself, I've done all this work, and so now I had all this information from the day, literally from the day I was born until I handed in that report, and I thought I would continue writing notes about things that happened in my life, never thinking that eventually, someday, I'd be in a position to write a book and talk about or write about all these things that happened to me in 1961. So, to answer your question, I've been writing this book since January of 1961.
How cool is that? And so she was an inspiration to you, actually. I mean,
She was my teacher. She wasn't the inspiration. There was another teacher, Mr. Zach Clements. He was my homeroom teacher. He was an inspiration. And the reason, and I go into this in the book, is he was the first male teacher that I had. Obviously, all my teachers prior to were women. And Mr. Clements was 21 years old.
wow.
And so there was an 8-year difference between us. And he was a recent college graduate. He wore very cool clothes, and that I was not used to. And then I found out he was in a band, which is very cool to begin with. But then I found out the band actually recorded a song. They had a 45 RPM song out on the market, and they were on American Bandstand. So Mr. Clements was he was an inspiration because he had a great sense of humor. So we would challenge each other. Well, he probably didn't think I was
Right.
challenging him, uh, but
But he knew.
I would challenge him. I would challenge him to get the attention of our classroom anytime I could. And so he became an inspiration. And I'm so incredibly fortunate that to this very day, Mr. Clements and I are still friends.
How cool is that?
Yeah, yeah.
It's amazing, some of those teachers that laid the groundwork. We did a special with educators, and they were actually talking about why they love to be educators, and they are a remarkable breed of people. And hopefully, he'll have a chance to see this.
Oh, yeah, I didn't even think of that. Yeah, I'll make sure. I'll make
Oh,
sure.
that's very cool. So, what instrument did he play? Do you remember?
Oh, the saxophone.
Oh,
And
okay.
here's the other part. And uh, I love Mr. Clements for all the things that he provided, the foundation, uh, the uh, but here's the other part. So in 1961, being of Jewish faith, I was going to be bar mitzvahed. And at my bar mitzvah reception after the ceremony, there would be a party of food and dancing. And so I asked my parents if we could hire Mr. Clements and his band, the Sherwoods. And so Mr. Clements played at my bar mitzvah, and there's a great picture in the book of me on stage with Mr. Clements behind me and the other members of the Sherwoods. But then, I mean, think about it. This is my seventh grade homeroom teacher. This is great. And he's still great.
You're charmed, Andy. I mean, you're absolutely charmed.
Yeah.
So, okay. You developed a relationship with Roger Maris during your career with the San Diego Padres, and even before that, correct? Or was it your
Yes.
career? Go ahead.
Go ahead. No, you go ahead.
Your careers kept passing. I mean, your history with the Padres to me is fascinating. I mean, absolutely fascinating. You what you did. You were a promotions guy for the Padres. Is that marketing guy for the
Yes.
Padres? Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
You had your pulse on everything. You met the Beach Boys, I'll bet.
I did. I had it was interesting from the standpoint. Ever since I was a little kid, I wanted to work in baseball. And at a particular point during my career with the Padres, I came to the realization. I was sitting in my office at San Diego Stadium alone, and I thought, how lucky am I that I got to achieve my goal by working in baseball. However, uh, instead of working in baseball on that particular day, I was working with the Beach Boys. I was hiring the company to do fireworks, and I was also on the phone to coordinate an appearance for the San Diego Chicken. So, chicken, fireworks, and Beach Boys was not what I had in mind when I was 13 years old and wanted to work in baseball. But it turned out to be very beneficial for me, exciting and interesting. So I wasn't on the baseball side of the operation for the Padres. I was on the marketing side, and that's why I was able to have a lot of unique experiences.
You met a lot of fascinating people. But what can you share with us about Roger that we wouldn't know?
Hmm. Um, well, he was. It was so often that people would write about him that I can't even bring to mind something that maybe most people hadn't read. Although I can share, now that I think of it, I can share a story that has not been written about Roger Maris, and it has to do with the time that I was working for the Padres. It was 1978, and the winter baseball meetings were taking place in Florida. And this was 10 years after Roger retired from baseball. And I was attending the winter meetings in Florida. And in the back of my mind, knowing that Roger and his family had were living in Florida, I wondered if he would come to the winter baseball meetings. And I had been in touch with him by phone and letters uh, after he retired, but I never asked him, "Are you going to be at the winter baseball meetings?" So in this particular meeting, I'm in a large room with a lot of other representatives from Major League Baseball, and we're going over some of the situations that all teams found as challenges throughout the season. And at one point, one of the guys who works with me at the Padres taps me on the shoulder and said, "Hey, there's a guy out in the hallway. He's got a crew cut and he'd like you to come out and see him." And I thought, is this possibly Roger Maris, who I hadn't seen in 10 years? So I got up, I ran out, and it was Roger Maris. And I was so excited to see him. And immediately I said, "Roger, you got to meet my wife. You have never met my wife. Let me go get her. I want to introduce you." And he said, "Great." And then he pointed over to a table and he said, "I'll be sitting there visiting with some guys." The guys turned out to be Whitey Herzog, Mo Drabowski, and a sports writer, Dick Young. So I go and I find my wife, and she is along for the ride. She's out at the swimming pool getting some sun. And I get so excited and I tell her, "Hey, you're going to get to meet Roger Maris." And she says, "Great." And I said, "Just follow me." And she says, "Well, I can't go like this. I've got to do my hair. I've got to put clothes on over my bathing suit. I've got to put makeup on." Okay, okay, I get it. So uh, my wife goes upstairs to the room. I go back to tell Roger that my wife is on her way. And I stand directly behind him. He cannot see me. And I'm listening into the conversation because at the appropriate time, I'm going to step to the side and interrupt the conversation and explain to him that my wife is on her way.
Right.
And I'm listening for that break, that natural break in the conversation. And I hear Roger say, "Yeah, when I was with the Yankees, there was this kid, and he was a big fan of mine, and I got to know this kid, and we became friends. And now this kid is working for the San Diego Padres, and I'm so proud of him." And I'm thinking, "That's me. He's talking about me." And he not only did I get to meet my childhood hero, not only did we become friends, but he's proud of me. Uh, uh, anyway, I said that was the break, and I said my wife's on the way, and she came down, and we had a quick conversation, and we went out to dinner that night, and that was the first time that I can recall that to a large degree, I think I acted like an adult.
Yeah.
Not 100% sure, but the fan in me, that flame was still burning, and I was having dinner with Roger Maris and his wife and my wife, and it it was a great experience. That to me is that's a pretty much unknown story about Roger Maris that speaks volumes about him and his generosity and his sensitivity.
It's I have that trouble too, Andy. Even I wanted to interview you for so long, and it's not that I'm necessarily proud of what you do, but I'm awed at your talent, and it's remarkable your ability to share this and share these stories. And I mean, it's just a talent that I don't possess, but I really admire it. So in doing the research for this, I have to get that out of my system. I don't want to come on here and go, Andy Strasberg, he's the coolest guy. I'm a big fan of his, but it's hard for me. I'm doing some comedians that I'm awed by their work, and I have to get that nervous energy out. But that must have been something. I mean, and it's how we connect with these people is remarkable as well. We've all had a chance in life to go back and be reminded of people or hearing from their descendants that you meant a lot to that person and we never quite recognized it. So what a beautiful moment for you to experience that. Kind of made it all worthwhile. I mean,
Yeah, and I have had, with the passing of Roger Maris in 1985, I thought that was it, and I was proud of the experiences that I had, but I was also very understanding. The relationship was obviously over. I didn't realize that the relationship was going to be transferred from Roger Maris to life and his six children. And to this day, I'm still included in get-togethers and vacations. Randy and Fran Maris, my wife and I, we've gone on a cruise together. We've gone on a couple of car trips together, and so it always exceeds. It goes well beyond those thoughts that I could have ever imagined as a 13-year-old, because there were certain things that I wanted. And maybe the perfect example would be the cover picture of the book, My 1961. It's a picture of me holding a magazine, and the page is turned to Roger Maris in full swing. And the thought behind that is somewhat pathetic because what I wanted was, I was curious as if I ever had the chance to have my picture taken with Roger Maris, I wondered what it would look like. And so what I did is I went to one of those photo booths, 4 photos for a quarter, and I brought the magazine, I held it up, and I tried to keep a straight face, and uh, and they had the picture taken. And I thought that epitomizes exactly what was in my heart, never thinking that someday I would have a lot of opportunities to have our pictures taken as I grew up.
I'm a true believer in there are no coincidences, and it's almost as if you and Roger were kindred spirits of some sort. I mean, you were an
Yeah, I
it was 13-year-olds like yourself that inspired him to dedicate himself to do what he did.
well, when he retired, I
Andy, I've lost your audio. You're
and
you're back.
okay, I went to the last game of the 1968 season, and when Roger retired, and there was an article that came out in the Sporting News, and it talked about Roger and what he had done, and it was written by Neil Russo, the Sporting News, and in the article, Roger is quoted as saying how much he appreciated me coming to his last game, and he also identified me as his most loyal fan. And I thought to myself, there it is. There it is in print. It's, uh, it's no longer me talking about Roger Maris. It's Roger Maris talking about us.
That is so cool. That is so cool. Well, give me some. Give me a few other things of what we'll find in this book, Andy.
Say that again. I'm sorry.
What else are we going to find in this book that will enlighten us?
Well, I'm going to give you two examples. One has to do with what I thought was uh, a total error on behalf of the commissioner. And it had to do with the fact that Ford Frick was concentrating on how many games Roger Maris had to break the home run record in. Now, keep in mind that 1961, that was the first year that the schedule went from 154 games to 162 games. And so there were obviously 8 more games. I did get through math. And, uh, and, and talked about how Babe Ruth hit his in 154 games, which is great, and I get it. But what the commissioner left out, which was very, very important, was how many plate appearances Roger Maris had in order to hit 60 home runs compared to Babe Ruth. Because as you know, Justin, a player can get into a ball game as a defensive replacement for 15, 20, 30 games and play the last 2 innings and never get an at bat. But on his record, it'll say 30 games. Well, uh, Roger Maris hit his 60th home run in his 684th plate appearance. Babe Ruth hit his 60th home run in 687 plate appearances. So to me, I was a 13-year-old trying to get the world to acknowledge he did break the record as far as plate appearances. But according to Ford Frick, it had to be games. And I just thought that that was totally unfair. And to this day, most fans don't even take that into consideration, plate appearances versus games. On the other side, uh, there were a number of experiences that, if anybody was 13 years old, they may be able to identify with a number of things that happened to me when I was 13. I had my first to see Sink the Bismarck, and uh, and so went and enjoyed the movie. And I never identified the young lady in the that I took on my date, but to my horror and shock, she brought her best friend, and that was not part of the deal. And I was upset and obviously disappointed because I wanted to go with this girl, not this girl and her best friend.
Okay. Okay, 1961. Wow. All right. This is, and the only thing I'd throw into the baseball, if you want to think about back when Babe Ruth played, pitchers pitched a lot more than they do today. I mean, it was not uncommon for a pitcher to throw 140 pitches. So if you came up against that pitcher after he'd thrown 140 pitches, his arm would be, let's say, just a little tired, and he may have pitched 2 days previously. So it was a different era and a different time, and I don't think Babe Ruth was a pioneer. Roger Maris was he was immersed in a quest to beat that record, and I can't I it's remarkable when I think about the pressure that must have put him under.
Yeah, and to me, the a lot of people have asked, which game was the toughest for me to watch. Was it, breaking the record? Not as much as the 154th game, where Roger went into the game with 58 home runs and needed three to obviously break the record in 154 games. And he had never hit three in his career. So he needed two to tie the record, which was possible. He had done that a number. He went into that game, and it was also the game that the Yankees were going to clinch the pennant. So and it was in Baltimore, which was Babe Ruth's hometown, and there also happened to be a hurricane off the coast of Baltimore into home plate. So there was a lot of challenges going on. So for me, the game 154, that had a lot of stress as a 13-year-old, and I, my assessment would be very tough for Roger Maris.
I can't, and maybe we can kind of leave on this note, but I can't imagine the pressure that you put on yourself to write this biography or this quest of this idol of yours, because you had to live up to what you expected from yourself. I mean, I don't know if that makes any sense, but it must have been very satisfying to bring this book home.
Oh, it was when the book came out, and I had Kevin Reichert was the publisher, August Publications, and when the book was sent to me, completed, and there it is with a cover, and uh, I looked at it and I thought to myself, that is a characteristic that I take a lot of pride in, and that's persistence. I wanted this book written, and I was very fortunate that Kevin was smart enough to realize there had been 6, 7 books written about Roger Maris and that incredible summer of 1961, but they had been done from a perspective of Roger wrote it himself, newspaper guy, teammates. a number of different vantage points, but none from the perspective of a 13-year-old. And for me, it was time travel. And it was easy time travel because, as I mentioned, I had a lot of notes and I kept a lot of those memories. So I was able to bring them out and write about them on a number of different levels. So, yes, I was pleased and thrilled. And I get the biggest kick out of people who enjoy my 1961.
Well, we were, not everybody, but most of us were 13 at one time, and we can kind of remember those struggles as well as you chasing a legend. I mean, damn it, Roger was a legend. Certainly that year he was.
That he
Okay.
was.
All right, Andy, I could talk to you all night, and I don't think that's fair to you, but I don't know, I want you to promise to come back and do another interview because there's a lot of Andy Strasberg we need to learn about. I want to learn more about them Padres. I want to learn more about the chicken. I want to learn more about you booking those big bands. And it wasn't just the Beach Boys. And I have a hunch you were kind of a trendsetter yourself when it came to marketing in baseball.
Yeah, there were a couple of things that I take an enormous amount of pride in, and I've left a mark, and it has since become a tradition. So, yeah, absolutely, Justin. You just let me know when the opportunity presents itself, and we'll continue our conversation.
That's perfect. And I want people to recognize that this was in San Diego, not a tough market to sell. All right, everybody. This has been Justin Case and my 61 author, Andy Strasberg, sharing a glimpse into baseball's past. Thanks for joining us. Please remember, additional information and links provided in this video's read more, including how to get yourself a copy of this book. Please consider subscribing to this channel and get yourself a copy of my 1961. Thank you, everybody.